Alright folks, my name is Freyn and welcome back. The Aberration creature vote is over, the rankings have been tallied, and the next creature coming to ARK Survival Ascended is the Yi Chi. So firstly, I'd like to offer my congratulations to the player or players behind this particular creature, as this contest had an incredible amount of creativity and a huge amount of submissions that needed to be beaten in order to win. Because of how many there were, in fact, we also had to rather skim over the suggestions a lot in the previous video, so today we'll be having a look in greater detail at this one, as well as a bit of quick speculation as to how I think it might appear in game. But first, how did the vote unfold? Well, going in, the clear favourite from the forums was the Mavia. It was popular in previous submissions, and it also had the most votes in the first round of this vote, and it continues to be reflected here, with the second place going into the other spider submission of the Yingi. There is a clear difference in votes for the top four compared to the rest of the grid, which is roughly what I expected. But the other six, I could not have predicted their order at all, and the Pteroturpton is unfortunately the first casualty. And we see its votes getting fairly evenly distributed amongst the remainder, but with the largest share already going to the Yi. But those votes had no impact on the overall order, and that leaves us with the Chasmosaur falling out in 9th place, followed by the Shunosaurus in 8th, despite it taking the biggest chunk of knock-on votes there. The Wacky Motorbite went out next, unable to outrun the competition, while the Yi tightened that gap for second, only a tiniest bit behind the Yingi. 6th place went to the Akulasuchus. Despite it being the creature with the most individual submissions, it just couldn't seem to make a big dent in the wider community. But there's so many people were eager to enter it here, and so many designs. I'm sure this will not be the last we see of it. And that brings us to the top half of the grid, where the Paleoctopus slides out in 5th, with the Yi continuing to pick up larger and larger shares of votes each round. Every time a creature goes out, it just gets a slightly bigger share than everyone else, and it's helping it creep up that list. The Yi is actually the only creature that's changed place in this entire time. All the votes have been pretty much fixed from round 1 except for the Yi. Now, sometimes in these, there's actually a bit of a pattern you can see with creatures' votes being passed on to extremely similar suggestions. You know, like large to large, or carnivores passing on to other carnivores. But this list is so diverse, there's really not much predictability in it. That said, I honestly though thought the top 3 was going to be the 2 spiders and the owl, but instead the Orni Megalonyx run ended in 4th place. But the largest share by far of the Orni Megalonyx votes goes to the Yi and pushes it into that 1st place, kicking the Mavia off the top spot right at the end there as the Yingi goes out in 3rd and the Yi takes the prize. Now, I would have thought maybe the Yingi's votes would have passed to the Mavia instead, being both spiders. Obviously, there's going to be some overlap in fans there, and so possibly that could have been its chance. But what happens in a lot of these votes is people look at what they think is their biggest competition and they put them in last. And I think it's quite possible that with them both being spiders, the Yingi voters put the Mavia dead last, try and push that out the way and get rid of the competition there. And in the end, it's the Yi that takes the first slot. I admit I am kind of surprised at its success. It was certainly the underdog going in, with some comparisons being drawn to, say, the Rock Drakes due to the gliding, and therefore a bit of unease there. And I also know there was simply just a lot of love for those 2 spider designs. There was a huge consensus that they fit Aberration atmosphere perfectly, bringing added horror and creepiness into the caves. But in the end, it's possible they simply just split the vote. Despite being quite different designs, they still have some overlap. Obviously, being both spiders, there's some general features that come with that. But it's also probably gone against them quite a lot as well, because simply arachnophobia is a very common thing, and I imagine a lot just wouldn't want to see a massive spider lurking on the cave roof to pounce on them. That being said, the Yi definitely had its fair share of support on its own merits. Even just looking through the comments on the previous video, it was quite popular, and I certainly don't want to take anything away from its victory there. But now let's have a proper look through that suggestion and see what it's all about. Now, last time I mistakenly referred to the Yi-Chi as a gliding lizard. It's actually, in fact, a dinosaur, as noted in both my comments section, thank you, and also in the original thread, which I somehow managed to miss. But the name Yi-Chi means strange wing in Chinese. But as many of ARK's creatures are actually slightly different species to their historical counterparts, the prime example being the Tyrannosaurus dominum rather than Rex, this one is instead suggested to be called the Yi Hui, or Bloody Wing, in reference to the vicious damage that the creature design is based around. Almost all finalists here had their own dossier design this time around, and the Yi is of course no exception. Commonly mistaken for its smaller cousin, Yi Hui is a ravenous beast fitting of its unique environment. Much like Draconis obscurum, Yi Hui is able to glide through the caverns with its bat-like wings, although it is incapable of true flight. Despite its fame as a murderer of unwary survivors, it's a rather fragile creature, barely able to stand against a raptor in a duel. However, its strength comes from its unique behaviour and hunting tactics. Instead of diving head-on like most beasts do, Yi takes a much more tactical approach, gliding over its victims while raining down razor feathers made of special keratin. The feathers themselves are a mere annoyance, but they carve the victim's flesh, covering it with light, barely noticeable wounds. When the Yi has covered its victims with enough feather-induced wounds, it strikes fast like a lightning, absolutely decimating its opponent as it's turned into mincemeat from its now very much open wounds. While many will choose a rock drake over a Yi Hui for combat, travelling and utility, those who have trained extensively along these wyvern-like dinosaurs claim they're the ultimate tactician mount, able to outmaneuver most threats in the caverns while giving even reapers a run for their money in terms of damage, though one must first master the drawbacks that come with the usage of a Yi Hui. But there's a plethora of dangers that can easily turn a Yi and its rider into kibble, like a pack of ravagers, a megalosaurus, or even radiation. Now, even just going from its dossier there, we already have a few things we can take away. One, it's larger than its historical counterpart. Again, kind of common for ARK creatures. Two, it is not an endgame mount, so it's not going to replace rock drakes because it cannot go into the red zone. It is not immune to radiation. 3, it is extremely fragile. It says it can barely stand up to a raptor in a duel, but also that it can put out as much damage as a reaper. So this thing is a complete glass cannon. It's really a creature designed around skillful use. Obviously for ARK, most creatures are simply a case of stand your ground and keep biting. There isn't really much to them. But this, the whole design is about being very, very fragile with dodging and high damage. So if you can master control of it and avoid all that damage, and ideally have a lot of stamina to allow you to do that, then you should be able to output tons of damage. But if you can't control it well, you're probably going to die to the first bite that comes your way. And that's pretty much what the stats reflect as well. Base stats they suggest are the same health as a Pteranodon, and we all know those aren't exactly the toughest of creatures to take down. Only 250 stamina, although that doesn't really mean too much because creatures drain stamina at different rates as well. Weight, extremely low, only 150, so if you're carrying more than just your basic equipment, you're probably going to be slowing it down quite a bit. Of course, though, these are base stats and a high level one, for all we know, might double its weight every single level. Doubtful, but just obviously take these base stats with a pinch of salt. And for movement, they're saying slightly slower than a Gallimimus, so pretty quick for sprinting along the ground, not just its gliding capability. Moving on to the damage, they suggest 40 per bite. That's the same as a Thyla, but obviously there are other factors involved as well here. You've mainly got the attack speed to consider, not just the attack damage, and then scaling. Some creatures gain more per level than others. But the bite isn't what the creature's meant to be about. It's meant to be about that feather shot. Those razor-like feathers made from special keratin that the dossier describes. The idea is that you sort of pepper your target with feathers, potentially by the hundreds from a distance, and then you dash or dive, ideally if you're gliding, dive in and hit the target to activate all of the feather damage at once. Now, they don't suggest the feathers do a lot of damage, it's only 10. I don't know if that's 10 per impact and then a different amount of damage on the eventual release, or if that's 10 per feather built up on the target when you do the release and there's nothing at all from the impact. This isn't something that's mentioned in the description here, nor is the rate of fire, but perhaps they were just simply wanting to leave that up to Wildcard. Either way, that's the basis of the creature here. You absolutely fill your target with these feathers. You're essentially looking at death by 1,000 cuts here. These are meant to be small, barely noticeable wounds. You're simply stacking up a number on the target, more and more and more and more. Then you dive in, you hit them, and maybe it's tearing sort of between all of these wounds, you know, that they've weakened the skin and you're ripping a big single wound between them where you've now sort of already scratched the surface away. Or perhaps the feathers are barbed and the actual eviscerate attack simply pulls them all out. I don't think it really matters in game terms, just from a sort of a lore perspective. And either way, this eviscerate attack causes you to deal a huge amount of damage depending on how many feather stacks are currently on the target. And it's where it gets its name from, that bloody wing. You can see the picture here. It's completely just covering the Spino in blood. Presumably this is just for dramatic effect, as it does specifically say there is no bleed damage here. The large amount of blood is simply a marker to sort of visually display how many stacks have been built up. They go on to suggest various different ammunition types, the basic ones being the feathers generated by the Yi, then having alternative options such as rock drake feathers you've gathered, or coating the Yi's feathers in other things such as the mushroom spores from around the Ark, plant species Z, propellant, reaper pheromones, narcotics, all sorts of various suggestions here that you could go with. With a further additional effect if the target loses more than half of its health in one eviscerate, getting feared for 20 seconds, losing all armor and resistances, and even being slowed by an additional 30% to really make it vulnerable after having that big shocking impact. But delayed damage attacks like this are always a risk. Maybe you've overstacked your target, and so you've wasted a lot of time there because you put in more feathers than needed. Or maybe you've understacked it and you really thought that was going to be the killing blow. You've dived into a dangerous spot to try and trigger that blood mark. You're out of stamina, you're low to the ground, and the creature's actually still alive. It's a risk, but again, that's why this is a creature designed for a high skill usage. It's a glass cannon with huge damage potential, but it's very, very risky. And to further exemplify this, on top of your gliding, your ability to cling onto the side of a wall, not climb a wall, note it's not a Deinonychus or a Megalania or something, simply sort of briefly grab onto the wall to have a brief stamina regen. On top of this, you also have the dodge. The idea is if you double tap your strafe keys or backwards, you will quickly dart back, having a brief damage immunity, like a sort of sidestep out the way, a quick dodge. Again, further playing into that skillful control. It's not just a brawler, you don't just throw it into the enemy and keep mashing that left click. Further adding to its complete glass cannon persona though, they not only specify an extremely low amount of health, but also that if you get hit by any sort of damage while you're in the air, it will actually immediately drop you to the ground and force you to stay there for a few seconds. As for taming, it actually goes against how the tamed version works. On the tamed one, they suggest that the eviscerate attack cannot be interrupted, that once you are in that dive, nothing will stop it, and you get in, you cause your damage. But to tame one, you have to wait for a wild one to try to eviscerate you, and then knock them out of the dive with a net. Possibly a bowler would work as well. Doesn't mention it, only says nets, and I think with the size they're going for, a bowler might be too small. Perhaps a chain bowler instead. But this brings me into the final section here. What do I think they're going to do with it? Just a little bit of brief speculation, and that's one of the things I think they would change, because we know that Wildcard have talked about possibly leaving out some of the later DLC things until those respective DLCs actually come out for Ascended. For instance, not having cryopods until Extinction appears. And with that in mind, there will be no nets for the harpoon gun until Genesis appears, so you wouldn't be able to net the Yi, which means either a change in taming method or a change in required tools with the same taming method. It would be a shame if it loses this idea of delayed damage, because it is really the entire thing that this is built around. But again, it would be fairly unique within ARK, and so maybe it's not the idea the devs want to go with. Maybe they're going to go with something else. I hope they still keep it on the glass cannon, and I really hope they still keep the dodges, because I really like the sound of that. Something very, very fragile. I don't really suspect they will keep the different types of ammunition, but who knows? There is a lot of precedent lately. The Gigantoraptor is almost word for word. In fact, some lines of the dossier are word for word from the suggested one. So a lot of the abilities have crossed over there, as they did with the Rhino, but at the same time the Solasuchus has changed quite dramatically. So there is precedent on both sides. We can't really make too big of a prediction, but I do hope they keep the look fairly similar. This sort of mini spiked feathered wyvern. I think it's a really, really nice design, and I look forward to seeing the concept art for it in the coming weeks. But I think I have rambled on long enough there already. It's early in the morning and I'm not at my best, so I'm going to end the video there. Thank you all very much for watching. I hope it's been of some use. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.